Good day, students. Welcome to another discussion on the history of India between 750 and 1206 CE. Today, we will be discussing about forms of exchange. Now, one of the most crucial elements to any system of trade and exchange is the nature of credit networks and banking system. Therefore, this is a brief examination on how credit and banking operated in the early medieval period in India. Additionally, it is important to note the forms of currency and coinage in use, and therefore those two will be discussed. Now, historians have pointed out how political fragmentation and the resulting lack of stability in commercial ventures made money lending a somewhat risky enterprise. There appears to be a consensus among the contemporary literary sources that moneylenders had raised interest rates and that the legal system had shifted to give them more powers regarding reclamation of capital. Now we come to the discussion of loans. There are two types of loans. These have been mentioned in contemporary sources. The first type is described as unproductive loans. These were loans taken out to meet personal or family needs and not meant to help with economic activities. These could be for anything, ranging from meeting an immediate need to making up a shortfall in income to paying for a large ceremony. These loans were taken not just in cash but also in valuable commodities like cloth, grain, gold, liquor, etc. Loans taken for economic purposes were also widely recognized. Merchants routinely borrowed to carry out their commercial activities. Several texts mention how such borrowers may invest or use their borrowed wealth to become wealthy themselves. Sometimes even moneylenders borrowed. One contemporary text mentions how a person may borrow a large sum at a low rate and then lend it out at higher rates and thus make a profit. A crucial element in forms of exchange was the letter of credit. These documents were in frequent and regular use. These documents recorded all particulars of a loan, such as the debtor, the amount loaned, the surety, etc. Now, there were different types of documents for loans when no surety was used. There were separate deeds for mortgages, especially for mortgages of houses, fields, etc. Various types of mortgages were recorded, including mortgages where the property itself could pay off the debt in time, such as a crop field. In addition to these types of documents for loans, bills of exchanges were also in use and they were vital for trade and related commercial activities. Now, there were bills of exchange or hundikas, as it was known, for cash, rice, barley, wheat, wine, and even horses. Deeds acknowledging even minor transactions and debts were increasingly common. It has been argued by some historians that unstable political and economic situation in the country meant that merchants carried letters of credit in place of large amount of coinage when embarking on long distance trips. While the free circulation of letters of credit may suggest a banking system, it would be incorrect to imagine the existence of a system similar to the modern system at this time. However, there is evidence for a rudimentary banking system which fulfilled certain functions. How do we know this? There is mention in contemporary sources of a man paying another through a merchant using letters of credit. However, the information regarding this is scarce. There is, however, extensive evidence of individuals making large deposits with merchants and withdrawing money against that deposit. Thus, a courtesan might deposit a valuable necklace and occasionally take money or expensive commodities against the value. There is mention in the famous text Raj Tarangini of a man making a huge deposit of over 1 lakh of dinars with a merchant and withdrawing money from him for over 20 years. Such deposits were to be treated as trusts. The person who had custody of the deposit was not supposed to use it for their own benefit. If they did use it, they would have to pay interest on it. It should also be noted that substantial deposits were often made with institutions like temples and guilds. Temples often received large endowments. This system of deposits was not foolproof, however. Merchants often took large deposits and then tried to embezzle them or refused to return the deposits. Both authors, Kalhan and Khementhro, have remarked on this tendency, and clearly this was a hazard to the common people. Now, deposits were of various types. Though contemporary sources could not always agree on the classification. The nikshep was a deposit counted in the presence of both parties. The nash was a deposit made without the direct supervision of the head of the house, and the uponidhi was a deposit that was sealed without counting. However, these definitions have been disputed by many sources. Sometimes nikshep and uponidhi are seen as synonyms. Even the legal works are vague about the exact meaning. Thus, nash was seen as an open deposit, while nikshep was handover of an article for delivery to a third party. In most literary sources, the most common term is nash, which denotes a sacred trust that was to be protected but not enjoyed. Now, we must come to the issue of debts and loan reclamation. The famous Arab traveler Al-Biruni has noted that it was customary for heirs to pay off the outstanding loans of the deceased from the inherited estate or from their own property. In practice, we find that the law was a bit more complex. The next 3 generations from the deceased, that is, the son, the grandson, and the great-grandson, had the responsibility to pay off debts if they inherited ancestral property. The legal texts of the time have entered into detailed debate about the differing grades of liabilities of succeeding generations. Thus, while the Viramitrodaya says that the son is liable for the principal as well as the interest, the grandson is liable only for the principal, and the great-grandson bears no liability at all. But other texts have argued that the son was fully liable, even if the original debtor was alive but incapacitated or for some reason could not be located. These contemporary sources seem to agree that the moneylender had considerable powers and freedom about how they would get their money from the debtors. Katshayana refers to moneylenders restraining the debtor in front of an assembly to force him to pay the loan back. There are also references to moneylenders sitting at the door of debtors or even applying physical pressure to get repayment. Apparently, the state did not stop them from indulging in such practices, thus making it clear that their conduct was within the law. A writer from the Gahadavala court has remarked that it was normal practice for a moneylender to imprison a debtor for an extended period to force full repayment. Some contemporary sources even hint at direct state support for the moneylender. Apparently, Bhattaputras or judicial officers could accompany the moneylender when he went to seek repayment of his loan, and even the expenses of the Bhattaputras would have to be borne by the debtor. We come to the matter of loans and surety. Given this heightened emphasis on loan repayment, it is only natural that requiring sureties for giving out loans in the first place would have become a common practice. There are even mentions of sons requiring sureties when borrowing from his future share of ancestral property. The people who stood as surety for a loan or mortgage carried equal responsibility as the actual debtor. And this was in fact enshrined in legal doctrine. In fact, a creditor could approach a surety directly and choose to recover his money from him, that is the surety, instead of from the original debtor, or could also employ a joint approach and require payment from both the surety and the debtor. Collective surety was also accepted practice where a number of people jointly stood as surety. In these situations, they were all collectively responsible, and one person being approached for repayment made all of them liable. One surety could not pass his responsibility onto another. In case of a mortgage, if there was damage to the mortgage property, the surety was still liable for payment and could even be compelled to sell his own property or borrow under his name to meet his existing obligations. Historians have pointed out here that most of the existing documentation seems to be entirely biased towards the creditor rather than the debtor. Many documents contain language urging the debtor to repay his debt without creating problems or protesting. Clearly, money lending was seen as a somewhat risky business, and efforts were being made to encourage moneylenders to give out loans by increasing their legal protection. A crucial part of any system of credit is the rates of interest. Now, the rates of interest were quite high during this time, often exceeding the customary numbers that had been mandated by the law books. However, some historians have confirmed that contemporary law books seem to make provision for this and condone excess interest. rates between 10 to 20% are mentioned. There were certain restrictions, such as on the total amount that could be claimed as interest. But even here, there was a rule that if interest was paid on an installment basis, then it could exceed the principal. Several texts mention ways in which very high interest could be collected, often being 5 to 8 times the principal. Contemporary sources point to a divergence here between legal theory and actual practice as regards rate of interest. Thus, law books mandated 2% rates. The Manusmriti mentioned 2 to 5%, with higher rates of interest being reserved for the lower castes. But in reality, far higher rates were being levied. According to one historian, the range of variation was between 1% and 13.3%, with 2 to 6% range being the most common. However, in certain areas, it could be as high as 30%. A Jain temple of Mahavir in Jalore levied interest at around 10 to 12%. So rates of interest at this time were quite high. Now we come to the system of coinage and currency. Now we come to the coinage and currency system, which was an extremely important aspect of the commercial system of early medieval India. And so we must get an idea of the nature of coins and currency in circulation at this time. There have been numerous arguments among historians that the early medieval period saw a great decline in Indian trade and commerce and a corresponding scarcity in gold and silver coins. However, eminent historian Ranabir Chakraborty has disagreed. He has argued that any detailed survey of internal and foreign trade indicates a flourishing economy. Not only was there a sustained high-value trade in luxury items, but also a lower profile trade in items of daily necessity. He has noted how agricultural expansion led to agricultural products being a major item of trade, something that would continue to increase over the centuries. Needless to say, such a flourishing trade system indicates the existence of a successful currency system. One of the most notable features of the early medieval currency system is the increasing ubiquity of cowrie shells as the principal medium of exchange. Chakraborty remarks on this and accepts that they were very important in the currency system between 600 and 1000 CE. However, he does not accept the general narrative that increasing use of cowrie shells meant a declining or languishing trade. For example, Bengal has been repeatedly noted for its use of cowrie shells, and many historians have thought this to be an indicator of economic decline. Chakraborty, however, takes a different approach. He notes that Bengal being in an economic slump was unlikely, given its huge role in the Southeast Asian trade. He has concentrated on showing how the cowrie shells themselves were at the center of trade networks, using the Arab chronicles as sources. Thus, in Bengal, for example, rice was exported to the Maldives in exchange for cowrie shells. He goes on to argue that the shells were possibly cheap items of trade and ballast in the Indian Ocean trade network. This emphasis on cowrie shells should not, however, mean that Bengal was lacking in coinage. Southeast Bengal shows heavy use of silver coinage, and there is considerable evidence of their continuous minting and circulation from the 7th to the 13th centuries. Archaeological research has also yielded evidence for gold Abbasid dynasty coins, indicating overseas trade and trade that used high value currency. There is also evidence to show that silver coins changed form from the 9th century onwards, which shows that not only were they in circulation, but that they were continuously being minted and were a key part of the economy. Literary sources and old books on mathematics have yielded traditional arithmetic tables where the conversion rate between silver coins and cowries was set at 1 is to 1280. That is, one silver coin was equal to 1280 cowrie shells. This is extremely important as it clearly shows the role of the cowrie shell in the economy. While silver coinage was very much in use for trade in remote or poor regions, cowrie shells fulfill the need of currency for low value transactions. Thus, use of cowries does not mean the decline of coinage, but rather it shows the existence of a hierarchy of exchange. Historian Ranabir Chakraborty has also made very important remarks regarding the changing nature of coinage and currency at this time. In ancient Indian history, ruling dynasties have produced their own coins from the Bactrian Greeks till the 7th century CE. However, from the 7th to the 10th century, there was a lack of dynastic coinage, and it has been theorized that this was because of a fundamental change in attitude towards coins, that they were no longer being seen as symbols of sovereignty. A fresh way to look at this issue has been through inscriptions. Certain 12th century inscriptions found in Odisha and Bengal have used the word churni in the context of assessment of revenue from a village. The term apparently means something that has been powdered to dust and used as a medium of exchange along with coins. It has been hypothesized by historians that this means it was actually gold or silver dust used in similar weight measures to coins. Historian B.N. Mukherjee has argued that the problem in dealing with coins of uncertain metallic purity and weight could be counteracted with using gold or silver dust. It was also far easier to transport than tens of thousands of cowrie shells and could be used to conduct transactions relatively easily. Mukherjee has therefore argued that this dust was a part of the currency system and it occupied a middle tier between the cowrie system and the high value gold and silver coins. This theory of the usage of precious metallic dust has been extended from Bengal to all of northern India, and many historians have come to the conclusion that gold and silver dust was being used as currency. Arabic accounts have actually backed this theory, as there is repeated mention of the use of gold dust as currency in the Gurjaro Pratihar area. Moreover, recent research into coin hoards of early medieval North India have heavily disputed the older theories of a slump in trade and a decline in coinage. John Dale has shown that while the gold coins of the Gupta period did in fact decline in North India, they were replaced by huge number of silver coins. These coins may have originated in Sassanid Iran and were quite popular in Rajasthan. He has also pointed out the use of silver coins in East Bengal, and from the 11th century onwards, gold alloy coins were also being minted in Rajasthan and were circulating throughout North India. These coins were marked with images of the Hindu goddess Lakshmi, and in the 12th and 13th centuries, silver coins, which had been marked with a bull and horseman, circulated between Kabul, Delhi, and Rajasthan. Thus, it can be understood that various types of coins were in use all over India in the early medieval period. Thus, this discussion clearly demonstrates how rich and complex the various forms of exchange were in early medieval India. Loans, interest, surety were all documented in detail and governed by contemporary matters as well as custom and legality. Clearly, the traders and moneylenders had adapted to the changing political and economic situation. Coins, gold dust, and cowries helped trade circulate all over India and across the ocean, thus once again proving the commercial richness of early medieval India. Thank you.